The last thing Marcus ever expected was to be afraid of his own wife. Not the fear of losing her. Not the fear of disappointing her. Real fear. The kind that crawls into your chest at 2 in the morning and convinces you that the walls are closing in. And the worst part? He had no one to blame but himself. Marcus grew up in a house where his father's mood set the temperature for everything. When Dad was calm, everyone breathed. When he wasn't, nobody moved. Marcus watched his mother shrink over the years, watched her become smaller and quieter and more careful, and somewhere in the back of his developing mind, he filed that away not as a warning but as a blueprint. He didn't decide to become that man. He just never decided not to. By the time he was in his 30s, the pattern was already carved deep. His first relationship ended when his girlfriend packed a bag while he was at work and never came back. His second partner stayed 3 years out of fear, flinching at loud noises, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, laughing too quickly at jokes that weren't funny. Marcus mistook all of that for peace. He genuinely did. And that, right there, is the most terrifying part of this entire story. Now think about that for a second. Think about the people in your life who smile every time you see them. How many of them are smiling because they're happy, and how many are smiling because they've learned it's safer than the alternative? Because to the outside world, Marcus was a good man. 38 years old, well-dressed, worked in logistics, coached youth basketball on Saturday mornings. He tipped his barber. He bought his mother flowers. He was the kind of man other men called solid. Nobody saw what happened behind his front door. Nobody was supposed to. He met Elena at a work event in October. She was the kind of quiet that pulls attention instead of avoiding it. She didn't laugh at everything the way people did around Marcus. She didn't rush to fill silence. She just watched, and when she finally spoke, every word felt deliberate, like she had already decided exactly how much of herself she was willing to give. Marcus was drawn to her immediately. But underneath that attraction was something else he couldn't name. A faint unease. Like standing at the edge of water and not being able to see the bottom. They dated 7 months. She had almost no social media presence, a past she described only in fragments, a difficult childhood, a town she left at 19 and never returned to, a version of herself she called someone who learned things the hard way. His friend Derek told him she seemed intense. Marcus said, "She's different." Derek asked what he meant. Marcus said he didn't know exactly. He just knew she didn't react the way other women did. Derek didn't laugh. Something about the way Marcus said it made that feel like the wrong response. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this one. 6 months into the marriage, Marcus started a fight the way he always did, over something small, engineered into something larger. He raised his voice. He moved closer. He used his size the way he had 100 times before with 100 different women. And Elena stood completely still. She didn't step back. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink in the way people blink when they're frightened. She looked at him with a calm so deep it didn't feel like calm at all, it felt like a decision. She said, quietly, "Marcus. You don't want to do that." Not a warning. Not a plea. A statement of fact, delivered by someone who had already lived through the worst version of that sentence and survived it. He stopped. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself he'd just been tired. Ask yourself honestly, if the person you expected to shrink from you looked at you like you were the least dangerous thing they'd ever faced, what would that do to you? 3 weeks later he tried again. This time Elena was standing at the kitchen counter with her back to him when she said, without turning around, "I know what you're about to do. Think carefully about whether it's worth what comes next." He asked her what she meant. She turned and looked at him the way you look at something you have already made peace with. He didn't touch her that night. He also didn't sleep. Over the following months, Marcus began to come undone in ways he couldn't explain to anyone. He started having dreams where he was the one running. He became hyper-aware of Elena's silences, how she always seemed to know when he was lying, how nothing he did seemed to land the way it was supposed to, how her confidence never cracked no matter how much pressure he applied. He was losing a game he didn't understand, against an opponent who never once raised her voice. One evening he asked her, during one of the rare quiet moments that felt almost like honesty, where she had learned to be that way. She was still for a long time. Then she said, "I was 15 when my stepfather broke 2 of my ribs. I spent 12 days in the hospital. When I came home, I made myself one promise, that I would never again let a man make me feel like my survival depended on his mood. No tears. No drama. Just the clean, settled weight of a woman who had already done the grieving." Marcus sat across from her and felt, for the first time in his adult life, something that had no name but sat exactly where his confidence used to be. What Elena had built wasn't armor. It was clarity. Years of therapy, of reading, of deliberately reconstructing herself from the inside, not to become hard, but to become unmovable. She didn't destroy Marcus. She simply refused to be destroyed by him. And a man whose entire sense of power depends on someone else's fear, when that fear disappears, there is nothing left to hold him up. 18 months later, Marcus enrolled in a counseling program. He told the intake counselor he had spent his whole life being one kind of man and didn't know how to be anything else. It was the first true sentence he had spoken in years. Elena filed for divorce quietly, without anger, and moved forward the same way she did everything, with her eyes open and her head straight. Be honest, if you were Elena, would you have stayed long enough to believe he could change, or would you have walked away the first time you saw who he really was? Tell us in the comments. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today.